Hey, what's goody, Frye gang? Now, within the last year or so, just over a year, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not Splatoon 3 will be the final game in the series, and I'm here to explain why I don't think that is the case. There are plenty of reasons I'll get onto later on in the video. And funnily enough, I will be talking about my all-time favorite video game series, Xenoblade, in this video. I will be comparing it a lot to Splatoon, considering Splatoon and Xenoblade had very similar development cycles, and a lot of things happening with both series are very similar to each other. So I will bring up those points whenever it is necessary, with one of those points being right now. Now, I'm not just comparing Xenoblade with Splatoon because they have very similar development processes. The developer of Xenoblade, Monolith Soft, helped work on all three Splatoon games. So the development cycles being very similar is not just a coincidence. Alright, sometimes the development history of one of these series can kind of hint at what is happening with the other one. So with that out of the way, let's actually get into why I think Splatoon 3 is not the last game in the series. And probably the biggest thing fueling this theory that Splatoon 3 will be the end of the series is this one voiceover line from the Nintendo Direct that Splatoon 3 was revealed in.
What awaits the Inklings and Octolings in the end? We hope you can witness the epic finale of this Splattastic saga.
And this is where I bring up my first point about Xenoblade and the similarities between the two series here. Now, keep in mind, just because something is true for one series does not inherently mean it is true or at all related for the other series. I'm just breaking up the connection because there's a high chance that if it's true for one of these series, it could also be true for the other, since Xenoblade and Splatoon are worked on roughly a large amount of the same people. Splatoon is being developed by Nintendo with some help from Monolith Soft, and then Xenoblade is being developed by Monolith Soft with some help from Nintendo. So there's a lot of crossover. So although these might not be related at all whatsoever, there are some connections to be drawn here. What caught my attention the most was the very last sentence. We hope you can witness the epic finale of this Splattastic saga. This is very similar to what Tetsuya Takahashi said about Xenoblade. Tetsuya Takahashi being the executive producer, he's basically the big mastermind behind all of Xeno. Everything that has to do with Xenogears, Xenosaga, Xenoblade is all because of him. All of this is his ideas and dreams and the story he wants to tell. Back when Xenoblade 3 released, he released a note thanking all of the fans for their continued support throughout the 12 years that Monolith Soft has been developing the Xenoblade series. And in it he says, Xenoblade 3 has been called the culmination of the whole series up until now, and it truly is the culmination. We at Monolith have put everything we have cultivated over the past 12 years into it. It is also a stopping point for me. The title depicts the conclusion of the Xenoblade series, or Xenoblade story, that began with Klaus's experiment. So what he's basically saying is that Xenoblade 3 is the end of the Klaus experiment timeline, which is commonly known as the Klaus saga. Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 tell the story and everything that's happened since and because of Klaus's experiment, and Xenoblade 3 marks the end of it. And further proving that this is not really the end of the series itself, he continues to say, while it is a conclusion, that does not mean it is the end of the Xenoblade series. It is just a stopping point in my mind. Now this is very similar, the wording is very similar to that last line in the trailer. We hope you can witness the epic finale of this Splattastic saga. Now the three Xenoblade games, their story is complete, and Xenoblade 3 marks the end of that specific saga, that specific arc in the series. And now with Xenoblade 4, which will most likely implement stuff from Xenosaga. I'm sorry for all of you non-Xeno fans, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but I can't explain much right now, as trying to even just explain the concept of the entire Xeno series would take a whole video on its own. But starting whatever the newest Xenoblade game will be, it will have a brand new arc, a brand new story that is not connected to the previous 3 games. This is very similar to Splatoon, 3 games telling one long story, and like it says here, witness the epic finale of the Splattastic saga. Not this Splattastic series, but Splattastic saga. So this is most likely saying that the main storyline of Splatoon 1, 2, and 3 is coming to an end with Splatoon 3. This is the end of the saga. So if we ever do get a Splatoon 4, it will start with a brand new series that has nothing to do with the previous games. Now, for Splatoon 1, 2, and 3, the main overall story is about the Octolings re-assimilating themselves into Inkling society, and Inklings and Octolings living in harmony once again. Now that we see that is happening in Splatsville, there's Inklings and Octolings everywhere living harmoniously together. Now that that part of that arc of the overarching Splatoon series is over, it's time to start a brand new arc, a brand new saga in the overall Splatoon series, and maybe Side Order could be hinting at what is to come next. We don't know. We know almost absolutely nothing about the story of Side Order, but at the end of it, it very well could hint at what is to come next. So it's not too far of a stretch to think that Splatoon itself is not over. It's just that this main story arc is concluding. Think of it as like the beginning of the end. And a kind of counter argument to that is that some people kind of hope that Splatoon 3 is the last game in the series, since they think it would be a pretty good stopping point for Nintendo to end the series with Splatoon 3, because, you know, it would be in fear of dragging out the franchise longer than it needs to and having fans lose interest. Now that is a very valid fear, I guess, to have. I don't think that is the case, and it wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense for Nintendo to stop the Splatoon series here. The first reason being, it would make no financial sense for Nintendo to stop the series here. Splatoon has constantly been a pretty huge series for Nintendo, with Splatoon 1 being a big hit back on the Wii U, Splatoon 2 selling even more than that, and then Splatoon 3 to this day is the #1 fastest selling game of all time in Japan. That's a pretty big deal. As of March 31st of this year, Splatoon 3 has sold 10.67 million copies. And as of December 31st of last year, Splatoon 2 has sold 13.6 million copies. So Splatoon 2's been out for just over 6 years. Splatoon 3's been out for only 1 year and a couple months, and it already is close to the sales that Splatoon 2 has gotten. So wait 5 more years when Splatoon 3 has been out for 6 years. It very well could pass 15 million copies, with it being the highest selling game in the series, which it currently is just barely below Splatoon 2. So just in the strict financial sense, it wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense to stop making Splatoon games here. Splatoon is making Nintendo way too much money for them to just quit. It would be stupid. So just imagine Splatoon 4. That would garner so much hype now that Splatoon is at the height of its popularity, right? Splatoon is more popular now than it probably ever has been, and with Side Order on the horizon, there is a lot of attention on Splatoon right now. So just imagine if a Splatoon 3 were to be announced. People would start losing their minds. Now, this next comparison I'm going to make to Xenoblade is a lot less substantiated, And on both sides for Splatoon and Xenoblade, I'm not really too sure why this is the case, and it's kind of funny that it's happened to both series. But to start, Xenoblade 2 had a pretty hefty expansion pass for its DLC, alright? We got a substantial amount of content with each new wave all the way up to the eventual release of Torna the Golden Country, which is a prequel game to Xenoblade 2. Now, Xenoblade 3 also had a DLC expansion pass ending in another prequel game to Xenoblade 3 called Xenoblade 3 Future Redeemed. However, the content that we got in the Xenoblade 3 expansion pass DLC was significantly less than that of the content we got for Xenoblade 2's expansion pass. And a similar thing is happening with Splatoon 3. Now, Splatoon 2, the updates were, from what I know, pretty substantial. There's a lot of content released with each update for every new season in Splatoon 2. Splatoon 3, although the content we are getting is alright, it's nowhere near as good as the content from the amount of content we got in Splatoon 2. There have been a lot of people disappointed with the recent seasons that we've been getting for Splatoon 3, saying how it's a lot less content than what we got in Splatoon 2. Now, at first I thought that, oh, you know, they're still working on side order, so a lot of the resources and time that they could be using to make content for the seasons are going into producing side order. But then I have to remember Octo expansion is a thing, and they were most likely also working on Octo expansion while the updates were still rolling out for Splatoon 2. Very similar to Xenoblade. Although Xenoblade's case is a bit more understandable and justified. In terms of Xenoblade 2, Torna the Golden Country, like I said, is a prequel to Xenoblade 2. However, everything we got in Torna was originally supposed to be in the base game of Xenoblade 2 around halfway, alright? Right after Chapter 7 is when all of the Torna stuff was supposed to happen. So Torna was basically already developed and already made. The majority of Torna had already been developed and ready to go, but eventually, due to time constraints and development issues, they had to cut all of that out of the base game and put it as its own side game, its own prequel game, which I'm sure they didn't have to add a whole lot to it since it was already mostly developed, since it was going to be in base game. So it's not like there was a ton of work to go into it after the release of Xenoblade 2 already. The same is not true for Future Redeemed in Xenoblade 3, however. Future Redeemed was always planned to be a prequel to Xenoblade 3. And it seems like the concept for Future Redeemed was already thought up during the development of Xenoblade 3. However, the actual development of Future Redeemed didn't start until after Xenoblade 3 had already dropped. So the case I made for Splatoon 3 earlier kind of makes sense here, that a lot of the time and resources that would have gone into the expansion pass went into developing Future Redeemed. So that would kind of explain why there's a lot less content in the Xenoblade 3 expansion pass than there was in Xenoblade 2. However, Splatoon is a lot harder of a case to make for, since relatively the development cycles are similar. So I'm not really too sure why Splatoon 3 is getting less content than Splatoon 2. And mind you, none of this has anything to do with Splatoon continuing on as a series. I just thought it was a pretty funny connection that I just had to make. Overall, I don't think Splatoon 3 is the last game, or that Splatoon is even ending anytime soon. Alright, it's kind of too big to die here. Splatoon is making Nintendo a lot of money. Splatoon 2 and 3, alright? Splatoon 2 is still selling units, alright? The last updated sales we got was last year, a whole entire year ago today. So I'm sure there have been quite a bit of Splatoon 2 purchases this year with, you know, the release of Splatoon 3. Maybe some people want to go back and play the previous game. So it's not too far-fetched to think that Splatoon 2 sold quite a bit more. But overall, Splatoon is making Nintendo too much money for them to just give up on it right now. And one thing about Nintendo, if a game or franchise is making them a lot of money, they are going to continue to make games to continue to make money off of them. Just look at Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It has constantly been the highest selling Switch game basically since its release. All right, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe to this day is still selling a lot of copies. It has been the highest selling Switch game for many years now, and Nintendo hasn't really needed to make a Mario Kart 9 since 8 Deluxe is still making them a whole lot of money. They're probably just going to wait until the sales for 8 Deluxe start to dry up a little bit. Then they will finally continue on to 9. They're probably just going to try to run out Mario Kart 8 Deluxe as much as they can before they kind of have to make Mario Kart 9. And even then, they don't have to make Mario Kart 9. 8 Deluxe is such a massively successful game. They're not really in a rush to make another Mario Kart 9 yet, since 8 is doing so well. Which kind of contradicts my point, but if you think about it, it also kind of just helps it. But all in all, TLDR, Splatoon is not over. Splatoon 3 is not the final game. It's making Nintendo too much money to do that. And the main point that people have arguing that Splatoon 3 could be the last game with that Splatastic Saga line, this very well, just like Xenoblade, could just be the end of this specific timeline, this specific story arc, and the next game will start up a brand new story arc with little to no connections to the previous ones. And as a very big Splatoon fan myself, I would like to believe that the series will continue on. Of course, I want more Splatoon games. I don't want the series to end really ever. The more Splatoon games we get, the better, okay? So I think there's a lot more positives to Splatoon continuing on than there are negatives of it stopping here at Splatoon 3. There's more suggesting that the series will continue than the series ending here. So if you're worried about Splatoon 3 being the last game, don't be. All right, we will most likely get another Splatoon game on whatever the new Nintendo console is releasing sometime within the next couple years, whether that be a Switch 2 or whatever else, okay? Splatoon was very successful on the Wii U. Despite the Wii U not selling that well, Splatoon was successful on there. Splatoon 2 being a very successful Switch game, with Splatoon 2 specifically being the 15th best-selling Switch game, and then Splatoon 3 being the 20th. And again, within a couple years, I'm sure Splatoon 3 will climb up even higher. So Splatoon is looking, the future for Splatoon is looking very bright. I'm going to remain optimistic, as I don't really see any reason for Splatoon to end here. So don't worry, Splatoon's not going anywhere, all right? After Side Order, they could be working on Splatoon 4 right now, all right? While we're waiting or Side Order. We never truly know. We just have to wait and see. But don't worry, Splatoon will be fine. But that's about it. So stay safe, do your next mission, and play some goddamn Splatty.